Marketer of the Day, episode 566. Don't quit your day job. Break the hustling habit, pay off debt, and get to a place of abundance with cash flow expert Chris Miles.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We have a third-time guest here, Mr. Chris Miles. If you want to go back and listen to his other appearances, he was here at marketeroftheday.com/103, where we talked about money mindset and how to figure out if you're a spender or a saver and how to just get the emotion versus the money problem fixed. Then he came back for marketeroftheday.com/427, where he talked about how to make your money work for you and how to sometimes play with that money and have it grow on its own, so that way you can spend more time on doing what you love. And today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about how to get out of the rat race. We're going to talk about how you can build up this marketing business, and we're going to talk about what Mr. Chris Miles has been up to lately, because if you don't know him, geez, he has a heck of a lot of things figured out. He has a lot of fun. He's a nice guy. He makes money. He keeps things simple. And on top of having this successful business, it seems like, I mean, from what little I know about him, he just has like time management just completely on just beast mode here, where he has all these different kids and he's newly married, and somehow he keeps it all going. So, Chris, can't wait to dive in and figure out all your secrets. How are things?
Good, man. Yeah, definitely beast mode with 8 kids, right?
Yeah, geez, yeah. And I mean, we had lunch about a month ago, and you were telling me that this kid's over in this charter school half an hour drive away, and this kid's an hour drive away. So, I mean, first of all, like, how do you sleep? Do you not watch TV? Like, how does it seem like you seem to have more time and energy than the rest of us?
Well, some of those days are pretty draining, I'll tell you, because driving back and forth kids to school is not exactly my ideal. It's one of those things that comes with the territory, just like business, right? Like, there's some things in business that you love, like you obviously love what you do, but there's aspects of it that you just have to do. You're like, I wouldn't mind delegating this out, but that's kind of how it goes. But no, I mean, I sleep. I still like watching TV. Like I still Netflix. I don't binge necessarily, but I'll at least watch an episode or two some nights. So,
I mean, do you have any tricks as far as maybe sometimes doing the legwork or doing the things that maybe you want to do, but you don't want to do every single day? I mean, for example, I have this podcast, and I would love to be able to sit down on maybe 1 or 2 days of the week and crank out like 10 interviews in a row. But I really worry that maybe I'll bite off more than I can chew. I worry that if I do more than 4 interviews in a day, I'll be really drained the next day. And then I've sort of dug into it a little bit as far as like, well, there's motivation, where motivation sort of pulls you to do what you want to do, and then there's discipline, where maybe sometimes you don't want to do things, but you can find the reason and the action to do it anyway. So, I mean, do you have any, I don't know, like life hacks or life tips as far as being that machine, even though on some days we might not be 100% excited about it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, I've started to learn lately, like, not just going for it, like, working hard straight doesn't necessarily work. You got to have breaks. This is something I'm just learning this for myself this week, and starting to understand about myself. And one of the biggest things I've learned to do is I definitely like to crank out some podcasts. Like, I actually am more productive when I crank out a few or so in a row and then take a break. Like, even if it's for like 10 minutes, just to zone out and do nothing, right? And then go right back to it and go to it again. And just, for me, it has to be relaxed. If I'm constantly wound up, I'm just not productive. I might feel like I'm working, but next thing you know, the clock just flies by, right?
Right. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, you got to have those breaks.
Yeah, take those breaks, and you're a runner, so I mean, I'm sure you know all about doing the sprints and then slowing down, and then as you're explaining that, what comes to mind is there's like the analogy of back in the Old West days, if some bandit robbed a bank and then the U.S. Marshal would chase him, then the U.S. Marshal would ride the horse for an hour and then stop and then walk the horse for an hour and ride the horse. And the reason they did that was because if they just rode the horse nonstop all night long, the horse would burn out or get tired or maybe even die or get hurt. But then by having those breaks, by being more strategic about it, they just kind of keep on going there.
Yeah, I learned that doing my very first marathon. I didn't listen to the advice that other experienced runners gave me, and so I remember going past those water stations. I'm like, I don't need water. I've run longer than this without water. I'm good. And not realizing the long game, which is if I want to last, I got to be willing just to stop and take a break. Even if it's just, slow down, walk, take a drink, it might only be for like 10, 15 seconds at most, but at least to take that time and then start running again. And I might feel like I'm going slower, but in truth, like you actually preserve a lot more. And this is why you got to take vacations, why you need weekends. This is why I think you should have time with family. And that should be your first priority is prioritize your family first, and the other things that are important to you. And then business comes after that.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, very logical. And it seems like that's an easy lesson for a lot of us to forget, that if things are going along, it's easier to sometimes get in front of a problem as opposed to waiting until it crashes and burns and then trying to recover. I mean, it's like trying to heat up a cold house all over again, or if you're riding a bike, it's easier to keep going and put a little bit of effort to keep going as opposed to just wait until, you totally stop and you have to get going again.
Right. Yeah, you really have to put that focus there. I mean, it's putting the right things in order first. I learned this when I went through a divorce about 3 years ago. I mean, it was emotionally crippling, so much to the point where I had time in my business. I wasn't working 50 plus hours a week anymore. I could barely manage 5 hours a week, But I'll tell you, like, what was amazing during that time is I realized my business kept going. And I was because the hardest thing for taking time off, right? The hardest thing to be able to relax, and this ties in with our conversation about sales and marketing too. But we keep telling ourselves that we got to be out there and hustle, right? We got to get there and hustle. We got to work 100 plus hours a week to make our dreams happen, and then we can live the good life. And I'll tell you, the truth is, and I coach a lot of these entrepreneurs too that have done this. They're still hustling, even when they have more than enough money, but they can't stop because it becomes a habit. It's not a bad, and the truth is, most of the activities you do in your business probably aren't that productive anyways. You could probably eliminate them. And that's the thing that divorce taught me, is that I realized, well, what's really the most productive things I can do? And that's where even now, like, I make way more money now than I did 3, 4, 5 years ago, but I will only work 10 or 20 hours a week. And that's not like just some like marketing hypey thing like, hey, you could be like me, work that 1 hour work week. It's not like that at all. By the way, I could do that, but the truth is, I actually lose passion if I don't work at least 10 hours a week. I lose that passion for the business and my mission in life. So for me, that's my sweet spot, is 10 to 20 hours. For others, it might be 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, but everybody has their own thing. But don't believe for a second that you got to get out there and work your tail off every single day, hours and hours and hours and hours for the rest of your life, pretty much, by essentially buying yourself a job with this business.
Right, and that sounds like a scary thing to fall into, that where if we don't have that self-awareness and things are out of whack, we might think that that if we put more time into things, that equates to more money, and it might just be we're working our tail off when we could be outsourcing things or doing better things. So you mentioned there that you went through a divorce a few years ago, and that kind of caused you to like re-examine things and figure out how many hours that you need to be working. And I'm sure that some people out there might either be dissatisfied with a 9 to 5, or maybe they've been recently laid off or gone through some kind of a life change, and they might be looking to escape this 40-hour work week sort of hell, escaping the rat race. So, I mean, what would your advice be for someone like that if they say, either I'm laid off or this job just has no future? I've heard about this internet online business thing. What's your advice for someone like that?
The best advice is don't quit your day job. Actually enjoy it, because here's what I've noticed. When I've coached several people that want to try to make that leap, because I teach a lot of people how to get out of that rat race, including how to get out of your day job to go full time in your passions. And it's funny because a lot of people like just hate, and I was there too. Like I remember in 2004, I was working a job 30 hours a week while trying to work a business the other 30 plus hours a week too. I mean, so I was working a lot of hours each day trying to get my side hustle, so to speak, get going, right? And I'll tell you, it was fascinating that now looking back, I actually made the leap. I made it too quickly. Looking back, I wish I would have been more grateful for the job and realizing that was a seed money to get my business going faster. In fact, I even tracked my money. Even after I quit that job and I went out full time in my business, my income actually dropped, because now all the pressure of having to create money in my business got to me, because I wasn't quite in a stable place in my business yet. I had one really good month, and that just emotionally got me to the point of saying, hey, look, I can justify it. Quit. And then all of a sudden, the pressure of having to sell and essentially pay all my bills and be the breadwinner, because my wife at that time had our firstborn son. Yeah, she was at home, so it was just me, and all that pressure hit me. And because that pressure hit me, I actually ended up losing more money. I ended up having to go back and get other little side jobs just to try to help make ends meet. So my advice is, don't quit the day job. In fact, do it strategically. In fact, love the day job, because that's the very thing that can actually get you out of your day job faster if you actually really appreciate it and realize it.
That's a really good way of looking at it. And I think that I'm thinking back to my own journey of quitting my day job, and I went through something similar. I had that ego problem in the way where I told myself, oh yeah, I had one good month, and then assuming that every month was going to be like that. But it's like, it seems like you sort of have to hope for the best and plan for the worst in that sense, and that it's great that you can build up this own income, but why not have the best of both worlds? And there might be that period of time when you're really, having to make both of these things work. But I mean, like you said, you have that job, and that's extra money you can put away for the worst case scenario, or at least have it so that way you can be on more stable footing. And you're making me think of I was browsing some message boards the other day on a site called reddit.com, and someone was posting about like WordPress stuff and designing like WordPress themes, and the post was something like, well, do you think that I can earn $2,000 a month making WordPress themes so that I can quit my job? And I was looking at it thinking like, geez, if you're trying to survive in this day and age on $2,000 a month, I mean, how fun eating those ramen noodles. I mean, why not make both things work and do kind of be forced in a position to streamline things and cram the most into a few number of hours, so that way, like you said, you can put in the, I don't know if sacrifice is the right term, but put in the extra work now, that way there's less work later. Yeah,
absolutely. I'll tell you, like I said, I tracked my income. Like whenever I had a side job, my income went up in the business too. So it wasn't that my income went up overall, although it did, but my business went up because when I didn't have the pressure to create, when I didn't feel the pressure that I had to make money, that's when most people wanted to buy from me. That's the trick with sales, right? And marketing too, is that if you don't need the money, that's when people are actually wanting to pay you money. It's when you need the money. It's when you're desperate for it that you have what I call business breath, right? That you just reek of business breath. Like people can smell you from far off. It's like when you go to those networking groups and you see those people throwing cards at everybody. It's like, call me. And they're all like overly eager to get your business. And they don't see you, they see the dollar, right?
Right.
That's exactly the thing you want to avoid. And that was a big epiphany for me. Like when I remember in my business, like everything changed. And this is in my previous business when I used to be the traditional financial advisor. Everything changed for me after I got into a car accident, and I missed a couple meetings because of it. And I was rushing to those meetings, and I was like, what am I rushing around for? Why am I risking my life to just be rushing around, working my tail off hours and hours a week? And I remember it hit me. I was like, you know what? I don't have to do this business. I can do anything else. I can just get a job. I can make money doing all kinds of things. And I had a big epiphany because when I realized, like, I'm doing this business by choice. I love what I'm doing, And so when I got to that point, when I was like, I don't need anybody's business. I don't need a single client. I can go and get a job and be just fine. I'm doing this by choice. And in fact, I'm done running around. People are going to come to me instead, so I don't have to kill myself. They can come to my office and they can come see me. And I'm not going to just go hound people every week trying to get them to buy from me. I'm just going to, you know what? I'm going to call people because I have concern for them. And I feel like calling somebody as a friend, not because I'm trying to sell them. And what's amazing is that my business boomed in that moment. In fact, I even made the rule too. I said, when I'm done working, I go home. Like I don't, or if you're work from home, like I do now, when you're done working, get off the computer. Like go be with your family or go do something else. Go have fun. Like be away. And it's amazing when you do that, because all of a sudden what happens now is that people actually start knocking down your door, or people start saying yes. I remember when I first did that, I was kind of scared. I thought, well, I hope I still make business, but you know what? I don't need the money. Just remember that, Chris. Well, the funny thing is I'd call up people just to say hi, even like Merry Christmas or whatever, right? And the next thing you know, like at the end of our conversation, they'd say, hey, Chris, do you still do this work or do you still do this? And well, yeah, of course I do. And I'm thinking, yeah, I called you every week for weeks, and you never return my calls. That's what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
They're like, hey, we need to meet. We need to sit down and talk. So now all of a sudden they're approaching me, and inviting me into the world rather than me trying to invite myself. And of course, when somebody invites you into their world, what happens is that now you pretty much don't even have to sell. You just have to be you and see if something's a good fit. And that's been my secret for sales and success since then, is that I don't force sales. I don't have to like do anything slick. I don't have to use NLP on people and all that kind of crap, right? All I have to do is be able to say, hey, you know what? Like, you obviously are here for a reason. You're talking to me for a reason. Let's see if I can serve you. If I can't, I'll find somebody else who will. And even when I've turned down business, what's amazing is that there's almost always, within a week or two or three people that replaces that one that I chose the right path to say, you know what, you're not a right fit for me, or you know what, you should actually work with so and so instead, because that's not what I do, or you're just not ready for me. I've had several people where I'm like, you're just not ready, but do these few things. Here's a few tips, and go do it. And funny thing is, those people come back around later and they end up hiring me anyways. And if you're in the business long enough, like, you'll find that people are stalking you and following you in so many ways that sometimes just being patient with it in that business is all it takes.
Yeah, those are some really good insights just in that. And it seems like it's almost counterintuitive, right? Because you think that, well, if you always hear about, burn the bridges, right? Or like back yourself into a corner so that you have to make it work. So you get into that survival mode. But it's like the way you're describing that, it's like it reeks of desperation, and then you give off all these things subconsciously if you're impatient and too pushy and just all those other things. So that's really cool. It's almost like counterintuitive there, where it's like, okay, once you have that breathing room, you're not just in survival mode. You have time to think. You can lay that groundwork, and it sounds like a lot of maybe like the unspoken part of what you said in there is that it sounds like it's a numbers game. That it's not just a matter of, I mean, being patient sounds like most of it, but it also sounds like you have enough feelers out there. You're plugging away. You're doing enough long-term stuff. Like, I mean, you're on this podcast. You're on other podcasts. You've been on things like Entrepreneurs on Fire, things like that. Yeah. It's like you have enough going where something will work out. And you're also making me think there have been so many times when I've made a high ticket purchase, or I've hired a coach or something like that, where it didn't happen right away. It might have been 6 months of following up, or just years of finally being ready for the person, where maybe they were just kind of making those touches, or maybe sending a postcard or an email or some one-on-one calls, and then finally when I was ready, I'm like, okay, finally I'm ready, and I'm like, here, I want to give you money. As opposed to them, like you said, doing some NLP, hypnosis, slick salesman tricks on me. It was just a matter of they had put out enough feelers, and they were patient enough, and they made sure to be diligent and follow up and organize and all those things, so that once I was ready, they were still there.
That's right, exactly. And I like the point you made too, because there are people that tell you to burn bridges, and I understand what they're saying with that, because they're talking about the opposite extreme, where people become complacent. They're like, well, I don't need this business, right? It's the opposite of what I'm saying, which is saying like, well, I don't need this business, so I'm just not going to build it. Like, oh, well. It's like, what? You should have a business that you're so passionate about, you can't wait to do it anyways. And on top of that, like, you should be grateful for the work that you have, the job you have that allows you to be able to essentially like finance that dream, that mission, that passion, and do it faster. And that's where a lot of people, I tell them, like, hey, let's create other streams of income, like not just in the business, that's primary, of course, but let's even create other streams outside. Like, if you got savings, like I get people to stop their 401ks. I'm like, stop putting money into something that you have to get permission from, like asking mom and dad for the car keys, right? Like, and you get your hand slapped with taxes and penalties to even touch that money, when you can take that money and invest it in your business, or you can go and invest it in things like, could you create passive income with real estate or funds or different things like that pay you monthly, that allows you to make that leap faster. And if you're doing both the things, you're building your business and you get other streams of income to pay you monthly, you just get out that much faster. It's that much easier and less stressful, and your job actually ends up being the thing that actually creates an accelerator to get out even sooner than you would if you just quit, burned all your bridges, and then you're desperate, and then next thing you know, you're on welfare, or you're back to finding another job because you can't go back to that company again, because that would be embarrassing, Right. Which, by the way, I'm saying this from experience. I've done all of it. Like, I've been in that place. I remember one time after I quit my job, I was so desperate for money. I went under at midnight. I went into drive-through windows, like Wendy's and McDonald's and banks and things like that, where people would drop change just so I could find change because I was totally out of money in my checking. I was negative. I was like, I just need cash, even if it's to buy potatoes or something, And I was desperate. I spent 3 hours searching, and I only got $4 of change. I was like Napoleon Dynamite, where I said, "That's like $1 an hour." Gosh, crazy stuff.
Yeah, and sort of a scary place to be. So, what changed there? Was it just a matter of of having a better mindset, or of getting more financially literate or intelligent, or plugging away your cash flow quadrants? What's the difference between those people that have that downward spiral that you're speaking of here versus people who are making the best use of their money and their time?
It really is. It is a mindset. It's you gotta approach it from a place of patience and abundance. So abundance attracts money, where scarcity repels it. Right? When you're in a place of scarcity, we talk about desperation or fear. That's what I was going through at that moment. I was in fear. I realized I could have actually made more money working in that drive-through window for an hour than I did spending 3 hours ducking under those windows trying to be incognito in 25-degree weather outside. Right? Just to pick up a bunch of loose change. That was a big epiphany for me. It's what am I doing? And you got to get to that place of abundance. And I understand. I've been there. I've been $1 million in debt before. I've been in a place where I was $16,000 in the hole each month, short $16,000 a month between my business and my personal expenses. I've been there, and it's a hard game to play. But that's where you just got to really look at. It's okay, what's going to actually pay me? How can I be abundant? How can I do what's right now? And step out of that and do all you can to stay in a place of abundance and realizing, hey, in this moment, I don't need that client or that new customer. I don't need it. I can do anything. I can go make money doing anything. I choose to do this and come from a place of power because I know I serve people and I help people. I just got to make sure I match up and find those people. And it might be that if you're in that place of desperation, you might need to get a job. And if you're not in that place of desperation, you might be the person you don't even need the money. You're in such a great place financially, but you can't stop. Well, heck, you need even more help because, there we got to not only approach an abundance mindset, but we got to get you to a place that realize, hey, financially you can make this leap, or financially you can get to a place where you can relax, and that takes practice. It's not easy. And again, I've been in all those places.
Okay, so we need to get our mindset figured out, and I'm hearing, kind of going back to the ego thing, that sometimes we might need to just put our ego aside and do what needs to be done to solve the problem that's in front of us, and then once we get the fires put out, so to speak, once we get out of that survival, then once we're plugging along, we also need to maybe have that self-awareness and know when it's time to relax or when it's time to change. So if people are looking to, like we said, or saying here, getting out of this rat race, or to transition from a 9-to-5 that they don't like into their own business, is it pretty straightforward, or is it changed from person to person? What's sort of the plan here for people to follow?
Yeah, it's always case by case. There's no doubt, because there's always different situations and circumstances. A big thing I try to get people to do is I try to get them to build up some savings to make that leap, so that at least the first few months or so when they make the leap, even if they're making money in their business already, they don't need the money, right? Because it can be a scary transition. I also try to get them to a point where their income in their business is at least 10% more than what they need in expenses. It doesn't have to match their income from their work, because maybe they make a lot of money at their work and they have lots to save. I've seen a lot of people that way. Sometimes maybe you're not making enough money at work. It just depends. But going at least 10% above your current expenses is always a good idea, a good rule of thumb. It's not always necessary, like I said, but it definitely helps a lot. So that's usually what I try to help people do is see how we can at least get them there. And sometimes 10% is not enough. You might say, hey, we need more because you make so much money. We got to make it 20% above because you got to save for taxes and stuff. So it's always case by case.
Okay, and what I'm hearing from your advice there is that it helps to have that outside person to maybe redefine some goals. And that scenario you just laid out reminded me of a friend who I was in a mastermind with years ago, and his issue was he had the 9 to 5 job at maybe a radio station or something, and then he built up the online income, but then he had a choice to make because he'd built the online income to be the equivalent take-home pay of the day job. So he was like, okay, here I was thinking I was doing great, doubling my income, but then now to let go of the 9 to 5 job, now I have to half my income again. And what I'm thinking now years later is that he sort of had the wrong goal, right? It should have been based on what he was spending or what sort of bills he had to pay or his living situation, as opposed to, well, let me just see how big I can build this and then my expenses inflate because I doubled my income and now I have to readjust. It sounds like just having that outside perspective to give you the proper goals instead of what just ended up happening by happenstance is the way to go.
Absolutely. Because I mean, you mentioned the income side, which is very important, but yeah, you kind of bring up another point too, which is the expense side, right? Even like, how do we control those expenses or get them down? Like for example, I mean, like, I have some people that are like trying to pay off their mortgage faster and they're doing 15-year mortgages. Like, no, let's do as long of a mortgage as possible. Let's do that 30-year mortgage, get the payment as low as we possibly can, because either way, like if you have a weird, rough month in business, and this is even if you're full-time in business, this is still true. You have a rough month, it's much easier to pay a lower payment than to be committed to a high payment, ruin your credit possibly because you made it late again because you're like, okay, business didn't come in until after I was 30 days late. Oh, well, my credit's hashed, but I make decent money. It's just all over the place, right? I mean, getting expenses down, and it's one of the things I talk about in my ebook on moneyripples.com, Beyond Rice and Beans, is I talk about ways that I freed up a lot of that money when I was $1 million in debt, and 16,000 whole each month. And I'll tell you, I use those same exact things when I launched Money Ripples 6 years ago, because I remember like I broke off from my company prematurely. It was actually one of those things that had to be mutual. It was just things weren't working out between us. And so we broke it. It ended up breaking off. I had to quickly free up some cash. I remember I freed up over $1,800 a month, just rearranging some things with like my loans and cutting back on certain expenses and things like that to make sure that I didn't feel forced to make money with Money Ripples. And it helped. I mean, we had a little bit of savings. I didn't have as much as I wanted, but I still had some savings to create that buffer and things like that. And you know what? We weathered that storm. And next thing I know, like within the first year, Money Ripples became a 6-figure company, no problem. And it was awesome. But it was still, I mean, those first 6 months, I made hardly anything. I made only thousands of dollars. I maybe made like 10,000 that first 6 months when I made the other, 100,000+ the next 6 months after that. So that's the beautiful thing about business, is that if you can get yourself in the right place, create the right conditions, you have the better odds of success.
Yeah, if you can be smart about it, then there's a lot of an upside. But if you keep doing these bad behaviors that shoot yourself in the foot, then you're making things really tough on yourself. So moneyripples.com, there's that ebook Beyond Rice and Beans where you reconfigure some loans and cut back. And I still think back to, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago when we first had an interview, you mentioned about there's just so many easy things that you can look at, like looking at how much you spend on food and having a budget and having those categories. You can just easily find, just trim here and there, and then free up all this money to give yourself more options, more decisions. And so we're kind of running into the last few minutes here, but I want to make sure that we cover the building up the business side of things, because you mentioned here that you've made the leap, you've built up this thing called Money Ripples, and it sounds like you have these clients, you have these products, you're promoting yourself. I mean, you're on this podcast for the 3rd time. So, I mean, there you go right there. There's a good example of you just putting in the time and promoting yourself. So in these last few minutes here, I mean, are there a few quick nuggets, or is there just an easy, simplified way of explaining how the heck to succeed in business here?
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about headspace, and we can go on that forever. And I talk about a lot of those concepts on my show, the Chris Miles Money Show, my podcast. But I'll tell you, some easy things to do is find your own voice. Like, really find your voice that sets you apart, that gets people to kind of fall in love with you, right? I think that's the biggest thing with marketing and with success in business, is that when you get to be true to who you are, make the business the way that you want it. Just like we talked about earlier in the show, like, you create your own freaking schedule. You have that freedom. And I know I felt those times when it doesn't feel like you have the freedom to choose your own schedule, because you feel like you have to take whatever you can take. but you really can choose your own schedule, work the hours that you want, do the business that you want to do. And when you come from that place of power to say, I own my business, I control my business, I control my time, because I am time and I am money. I am my money, right? You realize that you are those things. You come from that place of power, pretty soon you'll start to realize that the world will start to revolve around you more. And I don't mean from a selfish standpoint, right? But it's just like in the Matrix where he says, when the little kid that's bending spoons says there is no spoon. And the trick is that it's not the spoon that bends, it's you that bends, right? That's the power. That's the key. And so whatever you're doing, focus on keeping that abundant mindset, relax, have faith, have confidence that you're awesome, and promote yourself and market yourself in a way that's unique to you in your own voice, and use the strategies that you want to do. Don't copy somebody else. Do what you want to do. I love podcasts because for me, podcasts is the best way I attract people. Like just my voice is what does it. Other people, it's videos. Some people, it's writing. But find your thing and do that. Don't try to do 10,000 other things. Just focus on a few things. Keep it simple and easy. And man, watch, your business will be you'll be so much happier in your business. You'll love your life so much more than what most entrepreneurs do.
I love it. So focus on what's true to you and focus on what's working. And when you're explaining there about how you control what you do, you control your time, it makes me think of I had a friend who a few weeks ago posted some videos saying something like, you don't really have to do anything. You wake up in the morning and you say I have to, make that video, I have to call that client, or I have to drop off my kids at school. Well, you don't have to.
Nope.
Sure, there are consequences, and they might be money consequences or legal consequences if you don't, but technically you don't have to do anything except for those things that you choose to do. And when you're explaining there about creating your own schedule, you're making me sort of think it almost seems like the business you create is like an expression of yourself, as an expression of your personality. Because you and I both know people who, they'll make a quick YouTube video every day, or like you said, they'll have the podcast personality, or they'll do sort of the Stephen King lifestyle where they'll just write 500 words a day on a book, and then they'll just call it a day. So it seems like, yeah, as soon as you stop trying to do everything and have all this split focus and running around, and as soon as you stop trying to impersonate others and you figure out what it is that you're good at and what sort of company that you're trying to build, it seems like that solves most problems. And I think that and I think that for me, I can't help but always create little pieces of software and always create WordPress plugins and shoot out little short emails. And I have friends who they just can't help but hire a team of 5 or 10 people and get the team organized and get the team doing things. So yeah, it seems like different people not only have different personality types, but those personality types kind of build a certain size and shape of business, it seems.
Exactly. There's so many times I see people try to create the videos, or they try to do a podcast because I saw that was successful for somebody else. And the truth is that may not be your thing. And that's fine. Find your thing. It might be speaking live on stage. It might be doing webinars. There's so many ways you can express and do it. And if you just find out which activities give you the best results, just like I had to learn when I went through that divorce and I couldn't function hardly, I had to find the activities that were the most effective for me. And, just because, my podcast does great for me doesn't mean it will be great for the next person. It's got to be unique to you in your voice, not copying Gary Vaynerchuk or Grant Cardone. You do it in your own voice. You be who you are, and you will attract the people that you'll love to work with.
Awesome. I love it. You find that right fit, just like how when I do these podcast episodes, I like to just wing it and jump in and see where it goes. And other people need things to be exactly structured and to have questions planned in advance. Just you find it's almost like just experimenting over and over and trying out those things that maybe you do and don't like, and then trying out different experiments that make money and don't make money. And then if you can find that just where everything clicks, where it makes money plus you do it all day long, then there you go. Now you have it made.
That's right. Exactly.
So I guess one other thing as we're winding down is that I guess just to kind of wrap things up here, one thing that I'm really curious about with what you have going on is I don't know how to explain it, but maybe like the risk factor or the faith or just like really going for it. Because when we hung out in person, you mentioned that you paid a bunch of money, you bought a bunch of books to make basically pay a huge appearance fee to hop on podcasts, and that's the kind of thing where like, I don't know. Sometimes I find myself really hesitating to like buy some huge course, or like I have no problem hiring a coach, but sometimes a coach is like, here's a huge amount of money. So do you have any advice or insights about when to really go for it and when to really like risk or spend the big money versus like playing it safe and waiting?
You really got to follow your gut. And I'm one of those people like I think like a lot of people can, like you get caught up in the emotions of stuff. Like when you get invited for something, you could be flattered and you might want to be tempted to drop 5-10 grand onto some opportunity to speak or do something that way. For the most part, I try to let that wave ride. I wait a few days before I say yes. I feel it out. I say like, okay, is this what I want to do? Because I actually say no to speaking opportunities. This is one of the big secrets I've freed up my time, is I stopped doing all these networking meetings and trainings. You know, I still do some, but I'm very, very picky. And even live speaking, I do very little of it anymore. And you really got to go with your intuition, like to see what's right. Like we were mentioning, like that experience where I had John Lee Dumas, you know, Entrepreneur on Fire. An opportunity came up to co-write a book with him and Tim Ferriss, right? And for me, I was like, okay, I don't need the book. But I was like, you know what? But that's kind of cool. Like, that's kind of like good bragging rights. And also, you know, I would love to at least get connected more with John Lee Dumas, because I tried to reach out to him for a year and he didn't respond. And so I remember doing the interview and stuff, you know, that they did a chapter in that book. And then after I was done, it's like, well, what can we do for you? And I said, I would love to get on his show. And they're like, all right, I'll send an email. And half hour later, John comes back, says, hey, let's get you on the show. It's 4 months booked out, but let's do it. And we did. And it was kind of cool. I mean, I bought 200 books and spent a few grand, or I should say invested. But I'll tell you that one episode, though, made me about $30,000. Plus, because there's some other repercussions. I had followers that came from that. The cool thing is when I got on the show the second time, and I remember I referred to my podcast instead. You know, I said, hey, you know, check out the Chris Miles Money Show. You know, I had people do that. People started following me on that from that episode, and that I'll tell you, that one episode, and I had to buy $600 more of books to do that episode, by the way, which people think that's ridiculous. They're making you pay again. You've already been on the show. I'm like, yep, I already knew it created a great rate of return, because 2,000 make 30 was great. What can I do with 600? Well, I'll tell you that 600 has turned into over $700,000 in the last year, and almost about year and a half, 2 years now. So it's, you know, you just got to find the right investments, you know, like knowing what's right. And if it's in front of the right people, you know, you're doing the right things. And so for me, it's always like, is this the right opportunity? Is this in front of the right people? And is this really worth my time? And there's never a scarcity of opportunity. In fact, I'd rather say no to every opportunity than to say yes to the wrong ones.
Nice. I mean, that's a really nice insight there, that like you don't necessarily have to jump on something, and you can wait a few days and ponder it and let all the factors in and still consider the emotional part. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be, well, if I'm just doing everything on impulse, it's emotion based, and if I'm waiting around, it's logic based. You can just chill out, you can relax, take your break for a few days and consider all the factors and have that abundance mindset where, like you said, sometimes like some things are helpful to be connected more, and it's okay to say no to things as long as you're open to other things. Because if you missed out on, you know, buying Apple stock for $500 in 1997, or you missed out on buying Bitcoin for 2 cents in 2009, there's always going to be the next thing. So you have to be aware of it. And I was just at a speaking event this last weekend, and the whole room was really amazed at the idea of, it's okay to like plug away and, you know, put out your feelers and contact different event speaking opportunities, you know, different event organizers, and say, well, I can speak at this event, I can speak at this event. And then when they come back to you, say weeks later, if you don't want to go all the way to London to speak, you can say, okay, I'm already booked up that weekend. And the whole room was like floored at this concept that you can put out tons of feelers, and then when when the 10% comes back, you can choose what to say no to. It's not like when you shouldn't hesitate putting yourself out there, because you can always back out later, or you can always change your mind later. That there's all kinds of options in front of you there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, good point. I mean, you want to make sure that you're not just waiting for invites. Like, it's good to also, put your feelers out and create connections. There was a conference, one of the 2 big speaking gigs I created for this year. I actually had to reach out a little bit to them for it, and then pay $2,500 to be the keynote. But for me, I was like, hey, I don't care. It was in the right place. It was in LA. They had different locations. I said, I want LA because I have a lot of good West Coast presence. So I was like, nope, I want that. Like, I don't care about having Utah, even though I live in Utah, and that would be more convenient. I'm like, nope, I know there's going to be plenty of people in Utah fighting for Utah. I want LA. Give me that one, because there's a lot more of my peeps around California and Washington and places like that, or New York, and in those kind of states, than there are around like in Utah. So that's the key, is like you want to go for what really works. And for me, I'm expecting that to be a great investment.
Yeah, you thought outside the box and you did something different. Everyone else is fighting for Utah. You said, let me just go for some other area there. So as we're beginning to wind down our conversation here, would you say out of all the things that it seems like you figured out and you do right, is there one thing that's really responsible for a lot of your success that you can point to?
Sorry, repeat that question again.
Is there one thing that is responsible for your success? Out of all the things that we could list, you could say, I have this abundance mindset, or I think things through, or I have time management. Is there just one thing that's really responsible for all the success of yours?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, and there's so many factors, but if I were to sum it up, it would probably come right down to relaxing and being confident. Like having that faith, like you mentioned before, having faith, just knowing that the right clients and the right opportunities come at exactly the right time, and you never have to force it. And when I relax, when I come from that place of abundance, I expect business to come in just like I expect air to come into my lungs, right? I don't have to think about it. I don't stress about whether or not I'm going to breathe. I just breathe, right? And that's kind of what happens. Like, even if all of a sudden I'm short of air because maybe I'm huffing and puffing or I'm up high, doesn't matter. Like business, the same thing. You might see some things that maybe might look scary, but I don't do the whole like, hey, you got to meet with so many clients. Here's the numbers. You got to meet with so many people because your close ratio is 25%. So if you want to make X number of dollars, you need to do this. I just said, to heck with all that stuff. I went counterintuitive, just like you said earlier. And I said, you know what? It comes right down to me just being confident, relaxing, and just being me. And the right people and right opportunities always show up. And I'll tell you, my business has grown, not shrunk, even though by everybody else's standards, what I've done should have destroyed my business.
Nice. So relax and be confident. And there's something to be said about when you're in the middle of it. It's sometimes hard. It's hard to see the end of the tunnel. And then there's also the issue of, if you actually looked at all the work that was ahead of you, you probably wouldn't do it, right? Like, this podcast is in episode 600 or so, or just about at episode 600. And when I started, if I said, well, I have to do 600 episodes times this many minutes each episode, plus I have to do all this work of outsourcing the editing or doing some of the editing myself and posting the shows and reaching out to people, I'd be like, who knows how many thousands of hours that is? And then I'd say, well, I did 1 hour's down. Now I've got 9,000 hours to go. I mean, that doesn't sound like fun at all. So there's something to be said about just doing something reasonable and not necessarily looking at that big picture when you're in the middle of doing all that work.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true, because if you were just to look at that mountain, you'd say, oh, it's just too much. And you just don't take that first step. And a lot of success just begins with that first step, just doing the first thing. Like I said, relax, be confident, and just focus on delivering value, giving people true value and serving them to the best of your ability, or allowing them to be served. And man, it's so simple. It's so formulaic. It's just, you got to have faith in that principles always govern. Principles are eternal. They never change. Creating value for people, focusing on adding value for people and doing what's right, that never changes. I don't care what kind of crazy like social media or online marketing tools you can use. Those tools are just smoke. The real true thing comes at the heart of, how do you go about delivering value, and how do you go about showing your brilliance, allowing your brilliance to show and serve people. That's really what it comes down to.
I love it. So serve people, have that faith, add value, follow the principles, figure it out on your own. And it sounds like we kind of put together ourselves a little mini Think and Grow Rich episode here. So people need to, take that first step, even if they don't see the whole staircase. And to take that first step, where should they go? I mean, I know you mentioned you have Money Ripples, you have the Chris Miles Money Show. If people say, man, this Chris Miles guy, he's been on the show 3 times, seems like a really smart cookie. What sorts of websites, what sorts of resources should people check out right now?
I'd love you to check out my podcast. The Chris Miles Money Show is a great podcast for sure. I love that one. Other things like other books that are really good, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, or by Dale Carnegie is a great book. You mentioned I said Master Key to Riches. That's the follow-up to Think and Grow Rich. All great books. I'll tell you, The Science of Getting Rich is one of those forgotten books that's so good, by Wallace Wattles. The Science of Getting Rich. Oh my gosh, there's so many good nuggets in there. It's not even that big of a book, but I'll tell you, I review that book all the time and still pick up new things as I progress as a business owner and a person.
Awesome. I'll have to check out that one, The Science of Getting Rich. I'll put it in the show notes, and there's something in there to throw out, like tip number 500 just in this episode alone, is that it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs out there are readers, and we're always looking for that new idea, and we make sure to not overlook some of the, let's face it, some of the Think and Grow Rich money mindset kind of category. It can be kind of cheesy, but if we can overlook the cheesiness, man, is there some kind of good golden nuggets in there? But just as far as, there's something to be said about looking at who is where you want to be, and, we don't want to copy anyone directly. That doesn't work. But if we see all these successful entrepreneurs, if they study this money mindset stuff, if they're readers, then it makes perfect sense that we should also be readers. So, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Master Key to Riches, The Science of Getting Rich, and then make sure that you also check out the Chris Miles Money Show, because it's always good to have just some expert advice in your ear. Maybe instead of watching your 30th hour of reality TV this week, there's no reason to give up TV, but maybe subtract 1 hour there and add an hour of listening to something like the Chris Miles Money Show. That way you can have the good information coming into your head, and you can make those better decisions as opposed to just some kind of filler, some kind of waste of time. So the Chris Miles Money Show is what everyone should check out. And what's the easy way to do that, Chris? Is there a URL, or just search it in iTunes? How do we get there?
Yeah, you can use iTunes, your favorite podcast app. That's the easiest way to find the Chris Miles Money Show. Or you can go to blogtalkradio.com/Money Ripples.
Super great. So blogtalkradio.com/Money Ripples, and we'll see you all there. blogtalkradio.com/Money Ripples to get your mindset and your money figured out, because it's one of the most important things. And you get your head figured out, you get your money figured out, and then now you have the lifestyle that you've wanted. You live where you want, you do what you want, you have the family and lifestyle that you want. It really makes things a lot easier. Of course, money isn't everything, but you get money figured out, and everything else becomes a heck of a lot easier. So we'll see you there at blogtalkradio.com/Money Ripples for you to check out the Chris Miles Money Show. And thanks, Chris, for stopping by for another supersized length episode. It was jam-packed full of stuff. I appreciate hearing about what you have going on and your excellent advice for us. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Check out the latest episodes of our podcast on the web at marketeroftheday.com. And subscribe to us on iTunes at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes, or search the phrase Robert Plank in your iTunes app to find us there.